One of the important things to be able to do on the CFP exam and also in the real world of guiding clients with retirement planning is to be able to do retirement needs analysis calculations. And that's what we're going to study in part this week. And we're going to take a look at some of the major ones that are done on these slides. Now, you need to have a financial function calculator for use on the exam and of course for the midterm and final exam for this course. There's a major calculation you need to know how to do. We're covering that this week, the retirement needs analysis problems. The two calculators I would recommend, and you would want to get one of these two, are both from Hewlett-Packard. One is the HP 12C and the other is the HP 10B2. Now the 10B2 is readily available in office supply stores or directly online at Hewlett-Packard, hp.com. The HP 10B2 is a little bit cheaper than the 12C, easier to get a hold of. It's a little bit faster and a little more accurate when you have a partial period, such as part of a year in the calculation. So the 10B2, all in all, is probably a better way to go as far as purchasing one if you don't have one already. There are other calculators, such as from Texas Instruments, that are allowed to be used on the exam. It's just that instructors who don't use these other calculators are not going to know how to guide you on doing the actual keystrokes. I know the HP 12C and HP 10B2 very well, and I will provide keystrokes for those calculators. So I would suggest you get one of those two if you don't already have it. Now, when you're using these calculators for these kind of questions, there are a lot of things you have to watch to make sure that you wind up with the correct answer. You can only solve for one missing variable at a time, and those variables are present value, interest, N standing for the number of periods involved, payment, and future value. And there's also another decision on the mode. On these calculators there is a begin mode and an end mode. The end mode means we're making the payments or receiving the payments at the end of the period, such as the end of the year, end of the month, end of the quarter, etc. Beginning means we are making the payments or receiving the payments at the beginning of the period. And if you don't set the mode correctly, you will get the wrong answer, and the CFP board is very good at making sure that wrong answer is available as one of the four choices in the multiple choice test on the exam. So be very careful of that. We generally are saving for retirement at the end of the year or end of the month, so we set the calculator for the end during the accumulation phase. And generally we set the calculator for the beginning in the retirement phase. We want the money to come at the beginning of the month, beginning of the year, because that's when our mortgage is due, the rent is due, etc. That's the way to think about it. Another important consideration is that you use the proper signs. Generally, the present value number is entered as a negative number on these financial function calculators. The way to think about it is money coming out of the investor's pocket into your retirement plan is a negative from your pocket. And money you receive, such as the future value or payments that are coming to you in retirement, are positive numbers, and you would use a positive sign for those. If you're making payments along the way into the retirement plan, those would have negative signs attached to them, negative payments. So again, money flowing out of the investor's pocket into the investments have negative signs. Money flowing to you has positive sign. And remember also in these calculators, the present value number and future value number cannot have the same sign. They cannot be both negative or both positive. You will get an error message. That's how these calculators work. So let's take a look at some of the more common problems that you need to be able to solve. Sometimes an investor saving for retirement would like to make level payments into the retirement plan or receive level payments during retirement. And sometimes investors will want to have payments that increase while they're saving for retirement. For example, because maybe they expect to get salary increases or bonuses or improving compensation as they move along. So they feel they'll be able to put generally more and more money into the plan as they move closer towards retirement. And then also in retirement, they expect that the prices of goods and services they buy are going to increase. So they might want to have payments that increase also instead of just getting a fixed income. So these are possible things that need to be taken care of in the calculation for retirement needs analysis questions. If the question clearly says that level payments are to be made, then we do not use inflation in the calculation. We do not adjust the interest rate for inflation. But if it does say in the question that the person is concerned about inflation and wants to have increasing payments, then we need to use what is on this slide, the inflation adjusted yield, to calculate the amount we plug in for the I number, which on the HP 10B2 is the I/YR button, which stands for interest per year. Here's the way the calculation works. We need to know the after-tax return, which in this example is 9%, and the rate of inflation the client wants to assume. Here it's 3%. The formula is 1 plus the after-tax return, but as a decimal. So 1 plus 9% is 1.09, and then divide that by 1 plus the rate of inflation as a decimal, 1.03 in our example. So we divide that out, subtract 1 from the answer, and then multiply by 100 to convert it back to a percentage. And you see the final answer you get is 5.82524%. Notice we simply cannot subtract the inflation rate of 3 from the after-tax return of 9 and use 6 for the interest rate. Why? Because it gives you the wrong answer. As you can see there, the real result is 5.82524%. So when you do this inflation adjusted yield, you're going to get an answer that is a little bit below simply subtracting the inflation from the after-tax return. And that's important because if you don't do that right, you may be choosing the wrong answer on the CFP exam for this type of question. Now, the reason I go out 5 or 6 decimal places is because when you're talking about saving for retirement or the length of time that a person might be in retirement, it can be a very long time. And so the slightest little bit of difference in the interest rate can make a big difference on the other numbers. So I like to go out 5 or 6 places. The way to change your calculator so it shows, for example, 6 places on the HP 12C is to hit the yellow F button and then the number 6. And you will see on your screen that now 6 decimal places show past the decimal point. On the HP 10B2, the way to do that is to hit the there's a button for shift, the yellow key, and then hit the display button, DISP, and then the number 6, and you will also see that now there are 6 digits represented after the decimal point. Here's a very common type of retirement needs analysis calculation, and that is computing the amount that is needed on day 1 of retirement. Maybe you've seen some commercials where people are carrying around their number, and that's what we're looking for here, is that big number that they need to generate all the retirement income for themselves in retirement. So in this question, we are told that the person needs $74,841 in the year of retirement. They have 15 years until they retire. They're going to be in retirement for 24 years. They're going to assume a 7% after-tax return, a 5% rate of inflation, and the question is, what lump sum will they need at the beginning of retirement? Now notice that word beginning there is an important clue. We need to set the mode for the calculator to beginning. And if beginning does not show in the window there, you can toggle back and forth between end and beginning, and you want to make sure beginning is there, otherwise you're going to have the wrong answer. So the present value is what we're trying to solve for, and that's why there's a question mark there. And notice here I like to list all the items, so it's best not to just try and read the question and enter the numbers in while you're reading. It's best to create this template of PV, IN, payment, FV, and then the beginning or end decision to make sure that you don't make a mistake transferring from reading the paragraph directly to the calculator. You write them down in this template first and then enter the numbers all at once. It helps save against errors, and there's nothing worse than getting a question wrong because you made a mistake in entering things. Now notice the I number was calculated using the inflation adjusted yield we had on the last slide. It's not simply 7 minus 5 is 2, and again the number is slightly below what 7 minus 5 would be, subtracting inflation from the after-tax return. We have to do that inflation-adjusted yield calculation to get the right number to plug in for the I, or interest rate, per year. N is 24 because we have 24 years in retirement. And notice in this question that 15 years until retirement was actually irrelevant for this question. It is what we call a distractor. Sometimes the board will put in information that is not needed for the question, hoping that you might use it somehow in the calculations. But this calculation is done in the retirement phase. The 15 years until retirement is irrelevant for this question. Future value is 0 because the theory is at the end of your retirement you pass away and there's no money left in this calculation. And so we enter all those numbers in and then press the present value number, and the answer you should get is $1,458,000, approximately $1.458 million. Now this question is a continuation of the previous slide, and often on the exam they will ask one question and then you take the answer from that question to plug into the next one. Or they might just ask you that ultimate question, but you might have to do an intervening calculation to be able to answer the one they're giving you. So it gets a little complicated, unfortunately. But in this question, we want to know if you had the money today, what would they need in order to retire? If they could do it today, they would throw off essentially the same real amount of money as opposed to waiting the 15 years to retire. Now in this question, we do use the 15 years until retirement, and we use that for the N number. So now we're doing the calculation in the accumulation phase. We need to set the calculator to the end in this case. So we're looking for what amount today would be equivalent to the $1,458,184 you would need on day one of retirement in 15 years. There's no payment in this calculation. We are simply deflating the 1.458 million at 5% interest down into today's dollars. You plug in those numbers, make sure the calculator is set for the end. Although one little secret is, since the payment is 0, it won't really matter. But you just want to get in the habit of setting the correct mode. And then you press the present value button, and the answer you should get is $701,411. Now we're going to take a look at what annual payment this client would need to make to fund the $701,411 in today's dollars, because they don't have the $701,000 today. So if they're going to save on an annual basis, and this would be at the end of each year, what is the amount of the payment needed? Now since these are serial payments, in other words each payment that is made is going to be bigger than the previous payment, all the payments are going to be different. On the exam they're generally just going to ask you for the first one. So here's how we do this. We are starting with no money, so our present value is 0. The calculator is set to the end mode. We use that same inflation-adjusted yield, 1.9047. We have 15 years until retirement, and we plug in the future value number as what we got from the previous question, $701,411, and we solve for payment. Now here's the tricky part. The answer you get is $40,839. And if they ask this question on the CFP exam, believe you me, they will have $40,839 as an answer choice. But that is not the correct answer, because the client is not making the payment today when they agreed to do this retirement plan. They are not making the payment until a year from now. So we need to account for the 5% inflation eroding away at the buying power of that money. Therefore, we need to increase the answer, $40,839, by 5%. We need to add 5% to that amount. The easiest way to do that is multiply by 1.05, and so the correct answer for the first payment is $42,881. And our final slide shows what payment would be needed if the investor wants to make all level payments. The payments are not going to increase in this case. Same payment every time. This becomes a simple time value of money calculation. We're starting with no money, so the present value is 0. And in this case, for the I number, since the payments are not going to increase, we do not use the inflation-adjusted yield. We simply use the after-tax rate of return the client wants to assume, and from the previous slides we saw that was 7%. We have 15 years of payments until retirement, so N is 15. We're trying to solve for payments, so we're going to press that button last. Future value is 1,458,184, and make sure the calculator is set for the end. Press the payment button, and the answer you should see is $58,028. Every payment's going to be the same, $58,028.